Hello and welcome to Brands Hatch, to the first ever race meeting for the BRSCC Mazda MX-5 Super Series. It's a full championship covering 8 rounds across all the tracks in the country. And somebody who's very familiar with Mazdas is George Grant. George, you've raced in Mark 1s, you've raced in a Mark 3 today. New series, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling really chipper actually. I think the BRSCC have done a fantastic job because they've got 2 championships. We've got this one in the Super Series, and we've also got obviously the one in the TCR. But great, weather is not too bad, and I think we were all having a good time.
Yeah, well, track conditions are pretty much perfect. Cold track temperature. Qualifying was in the wet.
It was. I love it. I really love the wet. Yeah. I have a problem. I'm faster percentage-wise in the wet than in the dry, so I've got to work on that, which is quite good in a way. So I could do with some rain actually.
Yeah. So not a podium today?
Well, we're 8th at the moment, and you never know. You know, let's wait and see.
Good luck.
Thanks very much, Ant.
And Lyndsay's on the other side of the assembly area with Matt Pickford.
Thanks, Anthony. On the other side of the assembly area, we have Matt Pickford, who is joined us from. You've come from the Mark 1s. How long?
I did three years in the Mark 1 Championship and decided to move to the new Super Series this year.
What made you make the jump?
A couple of the other guys who I raced with were moving up, so I figured I'd go and race with these guys.
So you're just joining on with the rest of them?
Absolutely, keep up with the competition.
Exactly. No, so obviously your car was quite iconic in the Mark 1, so
yes.
the Martini stripe. So
I've gone Martini again, but I've gone a little bit brighter this year, and this is all because of my wife, who said that she couldn't pick my car out in the races last year, so we've gone slightly day glow, so everyone can see it this year.
You're starting in P11, all we can say is best of luck, Matt.
Thank you.
All right, back over to Andy McEwan.
Thank you very much, Lyndsay. Here's how the grid looks for the first race of the new Mazda MX-5 Super Series. Jake Bailey and Josh Jackson make up row 1, with the returning Paul Sheard alongside Richard Breland on row 2. Sam Bailey and Alex Miller are next, ahead of Simon Fleet and George Grant on the 4th row. Row 5 for Simon Orange and Patrick Collins, ahead of Matt Pickford and James Kell, Jim Hart and Russ Lyndsay, with Sam Dehaan rounding out the 15-car field. So Sam Dehaan pulls in place at the back of the grid. This is the rather spectacular onboard view we have, courtesy of George Grant in the number 169 car. Patrick Collins also carries an onboard camera as we are away and racing. A couple of stallers towards the back of the grid, unfortunately. James Kell and Jim Hart, I think they were, but the leaders make their way up towards Paddock Hill Bend for the first time of asking. On board with Matt Pickford and now on board with Patrick Collins, and diving up the inside of him there, the blue car, that was Simon Fleet. But as we exit Paddock Hill Bend, it's the white car of Josh Jackson, who has made the best start from the outside of row number 1. George Grant here trying to find a way up the inside there on the run up towards Druids of Jake Bailey. That didn't, sorry, Sam Bailey, excuse me. That didn't quite work. We exit Druids now, back down the hill towards Graham Hill Bend. Bit of dust being kicked up by one of the cars in front, but the leading contenders make their way out of Graham Hill, down the Cooper Straight. We're back on board now with George Grant. That's the blue car of Simon Fleet behind us. As we turn our way now through the dauntingly quick left-hander at Surtees, you can see there George hard at work. But there's the lead battle making its way through clearways for the first time. Jake Bailey is second, having started on pole, and that first of the 2 Clapham North liveried vehicles in this race is Paul Sheard, the other one being, of course, George Grant a bit further back. They streak across the start-finish line for the first time then, and immediately a slightly defensive line is taken by Joshua Jackson, our race leader. As you can see, there are a few damp patches on the circuit, but generally speaking, the track is dry. The grip levels are pretty good, even though the ambient temperature's not that high today, as you'd expect for an early spring afternoon here at Brands Hatch. But it looks as though Josh Jackson, having made the best start, is struggling to escape. These two were separated by only half of a tenth of a second in qualifying, and they're now separated by virtually nothing in the race because they're side by side through Graham Hill Bend. George Grant, though, is sideways on the grass. So too, just behind him, is Patrick Collins. So a bit of shuffling going on here. Collins is going to recover the best from that situation, though, to gain a place courtesy of George Grant. Leading quartet make their way up through towards the top end of the circuit. We've had a change for third there. Richard Breland has got himself ahead of Paul Sheard and now is going for second place up the inside of our pole sitter Jake Bailey. So Bailey, who half a lap ago looked as though he was going for the race lead, is now in danger of losing maybe not just 1 place but possibly 2 places if Paul Sheard can follow him through as well. Matt Pickford here. Oh, Matt Pickford slowing. What's the issue here for Pickford? Oh, look at that. Damaged front suspension or damaged steering arm. Whatever the issue is, that it looks fairly terminal, and he is out of the race. the hill now on board with George Grant. He's recovered from his grassy moment. There, in second place, is Richard Breland. Josh Jackson did manage to slot back in line in third, and that means Paul Sheard is fourth, but then Breland has a moment. It seems like all of the cars are a little bit edgy through Graham Hill Bend, and so they're getting a bit sideways, running out onto the dirt, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the positional changes occurring. Back on board with George Grant there as he heads out of that particular corner. But up at the front of the field, it looks as though the race leader, Josh Jackson, is starting to escape from this three-way battle for second. Richard Breland has got the dark blue car of Jake Bailey trying to get alongside him, with Paul Sheard, one of the most experienced Mazda MX-5 racers and preparers as well. Paul Sheard Racing run an awful lot of cars in both this championship and the Mazda MX-5 Super Cup as well, and Paul himself still a very handy racer. He only makes occasional appearances these days in Mazda MX-5 races, also does a bit of rallying in a Mazda MX-5 as well as Paul, but whenever he does make an appearance out on the racetrack or on the rally stage, he's always in the mix. Breland again sideways, and this time it is going to cost him that recently acquired second place, because up the inside does now come Jake Bailey. They'll be side by side down the Cooper Straight. Breland's got two wheels on the grass. That's not going to help his grip turning into the near flat out left-hander at Surtees. But for whatever reason, Graham Hill Bend is catching drivers out. It's one of only two left-handers on this short and sharp Brands Hatch Indy circuit, so the right-hand side tyres, particularly the right rear tyre, tends to warm up a little bit more slowly than the other three, and that means that when you turn into a corner like that, which is slightly off camber as well, it is very easy to unsettle the rear end of the car. On the brakes now into Paddock Hill Bend, where it's also very easy to unsettle the rear end of the car, especially when you're being pushed along by a fired-up Sam Bailey. Sam Bailey wants to get himself into the top four if at all possible. That, though, unfortunately, was a spin for Alex Miller, who started well, started sixth, but he's been off up at Surtees and has now fallen right down to the back of the field. Pickford here we ride on board with now, looking back at Sam DeHaan in the background. In turn is slipping back into the clutches of James Kell, and that was a move up the inside of Jim Hart. So Matt Pickford gaining places after not the most rapid of starts to the race, but he is now starting to move forwards. That is exactly what Sam Bailey wants to do. He's right behind Paul Sheard. Paul is not an easy man to get past at the best of times, especially when he's throwing the car sideways across the track into most of the corners. It's as good a defensive tactic as any, I suppose. Make the car sideways, that makes it bigger, harder to pass. Probably not up there in the racing driver's handbook as defensive tactics, but it seems to be working for now for Paul Sheard, who is keeping at bay the 107 car of Sam Bailey. But this entire leading quintet, although they've spread out a little bit more than they were at the start of the race, they're not miles apart from each other. These two certainly aren't. In fact, there may have been a bit of a love tap there onto the tail of Paul Sheard's number 18 machine as they made their way up the hill in towards Druids. If there was, it didn't lead to a change of position, but they're certainly very close, these two. They're the closest battle on track right now. They make their way out along the Cooper Straight once again in this 20-minute race. So we anticipate... Oh, Paul Sheard sideways again. Well, I don't think that was intentional. That was very, very loose indeed through Surtees, but he gets away with it potentially, because although he ran wide, that gave him the inside line for Clearways and Clark Curve, and so still, frustratedly for Sam Bailey, he can't find a way through, despite the fact that he looks quicker than Paul does at this stage. He is struggling to make it through past the MX-5 veteran, up towards Paddock Hill Bend, where again Paul is just late enough on the brakes to defend the position into the right-hander. As I was saying, 20-minute race this, so he anticipates somewhere in the region of 21 to 22 laps in the race. The lap times are in the sort of 56s-ish, 56-second mark, so we should start seeing those lap times. Yeah, that's about what they were doing in qualifying as well, so maybe a fraction quicker as the surface moisture from the racetrack has just dissipated slightly. Right, this is the battle for the race lead that's developing quite nicely, isn't it? It looks as though that gap is coming down between Jake Bailey and Josh Jackson. This is that fight we've been following for fourth place as it makes its way up towards Clearways. Paul Sheard may be just getting the better now slightly of Sam Bailey, and he can see not that far in front of him is Richard Breland, so there's a chance here potentially for Paul Sheard to gain more places. Leading duo head in towards Paddock Hill Bend, separated by just less than a second at this point of the race. Cars really do look spectacular as they plunge downhill out of Paddock and back up in towards the right-hand hairpin at Druids. The right-hander they go, hard on the power, but it's easy to run out wide there as the whole world drops away from you as you exit Druids, then down into this very tricky left-hander at Graham Hill Bend. Lots of curb used on the apex there for Jake as he sets off after the leader. Fourth place battle in towards clearways now, and it looks as though Sam Bailey has latched right back onto the tail of Paul Sheard's car in the slipstream now down the main straight. Slipstream effect not quite as profound here as Brands Hatch as it is at some other circuits, but it is certainly a good tool to use to try to find a way past the car in front. If you sit in that toe, get a slingshot down the straight, and that might just put you in position to attack under braking for the next corner. Doesn't look as though that's happened though, and if anything, Paul Sheard's now closing back in on third place man Richard Breland. This gap at the front of the field though is fairly static. It's staying at around the 8 or 9 tenths of a second mark, lap after lap. They're just sort of trading lap times at this stage. They turn their way through Graham Hill Bend now. Jake Bailey it is who has in fact just set the fastest lap of the race, so in his chase of the race leader he is going quickly. Simon Fleet here doing battle a bit further back with Russ Lyndsay as they dice the position towards the second half of the field. Well, if ever you were any doubt as to how hard Jake Bailey's pushing, that sideways action through clearways should tell you just how hard he is trying to catch the race leader. And there's plenty of effort on show here as well, as still Sam Bailey cannot find a way past Paul Sheard. Paul is just defending where he needs to, although this is the best run that Bailey's had, and he is able to draw level, but it's the outside line into Paddock Hill Bend. He's late on the brakes. Can he go around the outside? No. Can he cut back to a late apex and get the inside for Druids? No. And so the position still stays in the hands of the number 18 car. This is a great battle, this though, for fourth place, as they turn their way through the right-hander at Druids again. You sense that maybe, I mean, Paul Sheard is defending the inside line into pretty much every corner, certainly every corner that he needs to. So perhaps the best option for Sam Bailey to get through is to sell Paul the dummy, essentially, go to the outside into the corner and then cut back to a late apex and carry a bit more momentum out onto the next straight. This is a corner where you can potentially do that. But if you can get another good run in the slipstream now down the pit straight, then he could do that down at Paddock Hill Bend as well. Let's see. He's in the toe. Is he able to draw alongside again as he did a lap ago? Doesn't look like he will be able to. Is he close enough to throw one up the inside? No. Paul Sheard, you see, just moves over a car's width or so to the middle of the road, and that just deters Sam Bailey from having a go on the inside line. These five are a country mile ahead of the rest of the field. George Grant and Simon Fleet are doing battle for sixth place a bit further down the road. These two really locked in combat here pretty much. Well, after the first few laps and the early shuffle, these two found themselves together and haven't left each other alone since. And now this is closing up, isn't it? Look at this. Jake Bailey has really caught race leader Josh Jackson, and they're about to come across a few back markers. So just as the gap is smaller than it's ever been, here comes another challenge for race leader Jackson. He's got to negotiate the slower traffic without himself being impeded to the point that he loses the race lead. Up the hill he goes in towards turn one, Paddock Hill Bend. And where is he going to find the first of the back markers? This is, by the looks of it, Alex Miller, who's recovering from his spin earlier on. Alex qualified 6th, so should be fairly rapid, but just doesn't quite appear to have the race pace that he had in qualifying. And is he going to get in the way of either of the leading two? Often races on the short, sharp Brands Hatch Indy circuit can be won and lost in traffic, even with a reasonably modest field. 15 cars still a good number, but it's not a huge field. But you're still going to catch the tail end of the field towards the second half of the race. Leader gets up the inside of Alex Miller through Surtees, so that played nicely actually into the hands of Josh Jackson. As you can see that Jake Bailey just had to wait an extra corner before he could make the move. You see the gap now extends once more, but now James Kell is about to go a lap down to the race leader. It should happen somewhere in and around Paddock Hill Bend. Kell goes to the outside, which gives the racing line to the race leader Josh Jackson, and so Josh is able to really use the traffic there to his advantage to pull the gap back out over Jake Bailey. Bailey now has to try and find a way past Kell, which he does up at Druids. Goes to the inside line, which is always tricky in these sort of drying conditions, because whilst the racing line is dry, offline it's still a bit greasy. Right, this is that fight I was on about for 6th place. George Grant has it, Simon Fleet wants it though, and is closing in on our 360-degree camera holder. As he turns his way down to Paddock Hill Bend, this camera angle really does do justice to the plunge downhill. As they make their way back up towards Druids, down a gear, into, I would imagine, second for the right-hander. right out to the curb, not over it. If you go over the edge of that curb, then you do run the risk of getting pinged for exceeding the track limits. And once your official warning has been given, then time gets added onto your race. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and so on, until eventually the clerk of course has enough of you and excludes you from the whole race result, which is a rare occurrence, but I have seen it happen. Brands Hatch, one of the circuits where it is particularly hotly monitored. That's almost exceeding track limits there for George Grant, but not in a way that's going to benefit him, because look, that wide line through clearways has really allowed Simon Fleet to close in now. So across the pit straight they go again, and is George Grant going to have to defend on the running towards Paddock Hill Bend? Yes, maybe just takes a middle of the road approach, and the braking, you see that big hump in the road as you turn in, can really unsettle the car. George hangs on to it well, for the time being at least, to seed off the challenge. Now this is the 4th place battle, and they're now embroiled in the traffic, aren't they? So Alex Miller goes a lap down to Paul Sheard, and James Kell will also have the same treatment, one would imagine, down the pit straight. But does this open the door maybe for Sam Bailey up the inside? No, not quite. Paul is able to get over to the inside line and just about defend the manoeuvre. And now as they go up the inside of James Kell into paddock, that possibly will mean that they have to stay single file on the inside line. Yes, they do. So they safely negotiate the back markers. That all got a little bit too close for comfort. In fact, that could allow possibly Alex Miller to get a place back from James Kell in the background. Yes, so the 2 cars that have just gone a lap down, they are fighting not to be last in the race, and it was Alex Miller who was last. It's now James Kell, so good move made there by Alex up towards Druids. And that's an interesting sort of the flip side of the coin, that, isn't it? Whenever we talk about lapping cars, we always focus on the quicker cars coming through and how it can affect their race, but it does have an effect on the races of the cars being lapped as well, and they can use that to their advantage to gain positions. 4th place battle again is so close through clearways. This is what we love about Mazda MX-5 racing. No aerodynamic aids on these cars. They can run nose to tail, bumper to bumper from start to finish, and they regularly do. Rare that you see a Mazda MX-5 race won by anything in excess of sort of half a second or so. And this battle for 4th place, I would imagine, is going to be even closer than that come the checkered flag in about 5 minutes' time or so. Towards Druids we go once more, and look at that. Paul Sheard. It's been a very, very canny drive, this, which you'd expect from a very canny driver like Paul. It's so frustrating if you're in Sam Bailey's boots, because Sam will feel that he's quicker but just can't find a way through. That's a spin for, I think, Russ Lyndsay that he's recovering from up at clearways, and through goes Matt Pickford, so that's another place gain for Matt, who's fighting through from a slightly lowly position at the start of the race. Yeah, Paul Sheard, we've got a masterclass here of defensive driving, and any time that he does just slip wide of an apex or make a slight error, he's far enough in front of Sam Bailey that Sam doesn't really seem able to take advantage. Into Paddock Hill Bend, there's more traffic ahead though now. Sam Dehaan is the next car they're about to put a lap down. Sam will hopefully see them coming, and he will definitely see them coming now, because they're side by side in his mirrors. As up the inside goes Sam Bailey. There's a bit of contact. Oh, that was all a bit close there. Sam, well, I just said that every time Paul Sheard was missing an apex, Sam Bailey wasn't close enough to capitalise, but he was on that occasion. He went to the inside, but the momentum was on the outside line with Paul Sheard, and so despite a bit of Morse code being tapped onto the side of his number 18 car, Paul was able to stay in front. Right, Russ Lyndsay, this is recovering from his spin, being put a lap down by the race leaders. That is Jim Hart, and this is the equally close battle for 4th place. It's been this close all race long. It's been fantastic to watch, and whilst the position hasn't been changing corner by corner as we sometimes see in MX-5 racing, it's been a real cat and mouse tactical battle, this, between Paul Sheard and Sam Bailey, that's really attracted most of the attention over the course of this race. But Paul Sheard, apart from that slight error that he had up here a lap ago, hasn't opened the door and invited Sam Bailey through yet. So Sam is really having to work for this. There's Richard Breland, who will be loving what he's seeing in his mirrors, because with those two fighting, it's allowed him to make his 3rd position ever more secure. Matt Pickford there going a lap down to the race leaders. Jake Bailey there in 2nd place, again staying within a second or so of the leader. He got close, didn't he, about halfway through. Close enough almost to launch a challenge, but it just didn't quite work. Now he's possibly going to have to consider settling for 2nd place. Richard Breland He'll certainly be settling for third place, but he'll be quite happy with that, a podium in the first race of the season. It's worth mentioning, by the way, that the MX-5 Super Series, unlike its sister championship, the MX-5 Super Cup, that is a championship, so championship points are scored at the end of each race. For the Super Series, there are no points scored, it is simply a series of races. So no championship points to worry about, it's win or lose, essentially, for the drivers. And so that will possibly encourage them to have a bit of a go. If there's a chance of snatching a race victory towards the end of the race, rather than settle for second and take the points, there's no reason to do that really now, apart from the fact that you don't want to get involved in any contact, of course. But in theory, not having any championship points up for grabs means that the drivers can just cut loose a bit and just enjoy themselves, rather than having to worry about piecing together a championship campaign. Leaders making their way back through Paddock Hill Bend, and it is this also familiar pattern that we've got at the front of the field, where one lap Josh Jackson sets a quick lap, and then Jake Bailey goes a 10th quicker than him on the next lap, and then Josh Jackson goes a 10th quicker than him on the next lap. They're just trading lap times and not really getting any closer together. Matt Pickford here though, doing battle with the blue and white car of Russ Lyndsay, making his way down towards Graham Hill Bend. This is for 8th position, so that is a battle for position, albeit one lap down now from the race leader, who is this man, who is turning his way through clearways once more. Body language of the car tells me that he's still pushing on, he's still feeling the pressure from Jake Bailey behind him. But as he comes up towards the start-finish line once more, it is looking very, very comfortable indeed for Josh Jackson, who's actually extended the margin now to over a second for pretty much the first time of the race. There's confirmation of Jake Bailey's fastest lap that he set earlier on lap 10, but that was a very quick lap, so he does have that fastest lap of the race, but he can't piece it together lap after lap in a consistent enough fashion to really chase after the leader. And this is the battle I was mentioning just now between Pickford and Lyndsay for 8th position. Both of these drivers have had their dramas in the race so far. Lyndsay a bit of a sluggish start, and Pickford a bit of a sluggish start, and Lyndsay with that spin that we saw him recovering from up at clearways, which is why they've both got a lap down. Ordinarily, you wouldn't expect them to have slipped a lap behind, even on a short and sharp circuit like this one at the Brands Hatch Indy circuit. So back out across the start-finish line comes Josh Jackson, and Josh goes on to another lap as he now makes his way towards the end of the opening round of the Mazda MX-5 Super Series, which has been a very competitive race through the midfield, but at the front it has to be said that Josh, having made the start from the outside of the front row, has really stamped his authority on this race. Pickford in the background, we've got this fight for 4th, which refuses to die down. That's Richard Breland in 3rd, hang back a 2nd, and there just in the background you can see Paul Sheard still in 4th. Every time I think that he's made an escape from Sam Bailey, Sam latches back onto his coattails, and in fact he's having a go in the background. Look at the inside into Graham Hill Bend, so that battle is going to run and run right down to the checkered flag, I think. Speaking of checkered flags, we are approaching the end of the race now for Josh Jackson, I believe. The time is slowly running out in this one, and he'll be very happy indeed to see that checkered flag at the end of the race, which he sees now. So Josh Jackson takes victory in the opening round of the Mazda MX-5 Super Series from Jake Bailey in 2nd place. This is Matt Pickford, and he will hold on to that 8th position. Confirmation of the result there. Jackson from Bailey the top 2, Richard Breland in 3rd. Paul Sheard did hang on by the skin of his teeth up, less than a 10th of a second ahead of Sam Bailey. Then it's George Grant, Simon Fleet, Matt Pickford, Russ Lyndsay and Alex Miller, with Jim Hart, Sam Dehaan and James Kell outside the top 10. Patrick Collins and Simon Orange were non-finishers.
Josh, first win of the first round of the Mazda Super Series, how are you feeling?
Yeah, feeling good. Enjoyed the race. Jake kept me honest, so yeah, no, it was good. It was a good laugh.
Yeah, and you've got a bit of history with the racing Mazdas. What's it like with these very experienced drivers?
Yeah, both are experienced in Mark 3s. This is the first ever race in a Mark 3, so it was a bit different to the Mark 1, but no, I enjoyed it. It was good.
Another win on the hands later?
Let's hope so.
Good luck.
Cheers.
Jake, 2nd place in the first ever round of the Mazda MX-5 Super Series. Well done.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's a good race.
It's great competition out there. You're probably the youngest driver.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. I had a good race with Josh. He wasn't too far away, and I'm looking forward to the next race tomorrow.
Fantastic. What are your expectations for race 2?
Well, fingers crossed, and we'll see how it goes.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Richard, 3rd place. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was a good race. The team Blink Motorsport did a great job setting the car up, and yeah, really happy with